Good afternoon.
Hello, how are you?
Very well.
Good.
This, for some reason, I sort of missed this event and just figured I'd log in and see what it's all about.
Sure, we're just gonna be schmoozing. We're gonna, it's gonna be a bit of a schmooze, which is nice.
Schmooze, no learning and Torah knowledge.
No, there will. The Cantor will bring some good learning. I have less learning to share. How have you been? What's going on?
Reasonably well, all things considered.
Yeah?
Yeah.
So you're enjoying the Aurora Borealis wherever you are?
Absolutely. It's my backup.
Nice.
Who's this? Oh, Anita.
Anita. You got her video.
Oh, you're techied up. You're also muted too, so we can't hear you. You have to click demute.
Thank you. I have the technology. I'm missing a few links between the hands and the technology.
I have the same problem. It's
well,
only one link in the chain goes, and the whole thing.
And and it only has to be scratched. It's all in chaos.
Yeah.
Michael, that apartment behind you is gorgeous. Is that really your house? Oh, you're muted.
You're muted. You have to unmute yourself. Use the mouse. Click on the icon.
Oh, look at this expert.
What? So is that your place, your house?
That's the office.
Oh, the office.
Oh, which office? Where are you?
I am in virtual reality. I didn't want to clean my room.
I thought so.
Okay.
You sucked me in, and Eric, I can see that you're obviously
very real. Yeah.
This is a picture that my dad bought at a garage sale for like $1, and it was it's an Israeli artist from Accra, and so I remember one time I didn't have any art on my walls. I said, "Dad, can I put a frame around this?" And so that's my picture, my story.
Gorgeous.
Picture.
Nice.
It's a hot one out today.
Yes.
I haven't been out since early. I was out early before 8.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Nice.
Yeah.
Now.
I went for a walk this morning, and it was already 29 degrees, and twice around Center Point Park, and I was ready to pass out.
Wow.
I was out just before, did not do too much walking. I'm planning on going out after, so.
It gets real hot by the end of the day. You have to sort of plan your...
How did I end up as the host?
I made you the host.
Oh, that explains
I
it.
just made you the host. That's how it happened.
Mazel tov, Yasher
That
Koach.
explains it. That really
The host with the most.
That's fine.
Passing the back.
So, Rabbi Zuker, if you have any screens to share, you'll just have to let me know.
I do not have any screens to share. But I'm very glad to be here with everyone who is here. It's nice to see all of you. It's nice to just, whatever excuse we can come up with to spend some time, hanging out and talking is always nice.
Yeah.
And this idea actually came from Jody Green, who suggested that Cantor Green and I might do some teaching about, it's about duchening, but it's about sort of Birkat Kohanim and blessing more broadly. So that's sort of where I want to start, is sort of thinking about, what do we mean when we say blessings? That we look for blessings, that we say blessings, that we are blessings, that we have blessing that we count our blessings, sort of in that general direction. Blessings mean a lot of different things. I certainly think during COVID, we've all been maybe practicing more at discerning the blessings. I see Anita nodding, discerning the blessings in our lives. When some things get taken away, it makes you appreciate the other things, right? Do you want to add something, Anita?
Sorry, I'm a head nodder. Just
Good.
like you hate to do judgments and comparisons, but we do naturally. And even though we think we're going through hard times, it's a really knock in the head to say, look how blessed I am. And therefore, if I'm so blessed, I need to pay, for me anyways, it's to pay it forward, show appreciation. In whatever way that is, if it's saying hello to somebody that may not get anybody else in their life to say hello to them that day, to making a donation or whatever. That's how I see the appreciation and the blessings together.
Finding the positive and finding the ways to pay it forward as well, to keep it moving. Absolutely. And so one of the blessings that if you were to ask me, how do Jews bless each other, I would think immediately of blessing children on Shabbat, where we use the priestly blessing. Maybe Cantor Green wants to put just the blessing up since I keep talking about it.
Absolutely.
The 3-line priestly blessing. It also appears in our Amidah. Every single Amidah that we have, only when we recite it aloud in a minyan, which means that now we have not recited the priestly blessing at all for months, and maybe that's a bit of where our impetus to look at these lines came. There it is, right at the bottom there, because we haven't been able to hear these lines for such.
Are you only supposed to say it when you have 10 people together?
It's only said during the repetition of the Amidah. It's in the Amidah, and when we say it quietly, we actually don't say that part. But then when the repetition is done aloud, which you only do if there's a minyan, then the leader would say that part. So because in our online davening that we've had, the person who leads has been saying their private Amidah aloud, so they also haven't been saying these lines. So we really have been missing out on these lines. So they live in our Amidah. They live in Friday night. They also live in the Torah. They come from Torah portion from, was it 2 weeks ago? Naso.
But aren't they
No.
aren't they different for boys and girls?
So the introduction is different for boys and girls.
Yeah, okay.
So the introduction, and it's actually it's one of the mitzvot that we perform like almost exactly the way that the Torah says. So when we bless girls, we say Yisimech Elohim Kasar Rivka Rachel v'Leah. May God make you like Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah. And then we say those 3 lines. But for boys, we say Yisimcha Ephraim v'chi Menashe. May God make you like Ephraim and Menashe, which is exactly what it says in the Torah about Ephraim and Menashe, that the Jewish people will bless themselves by your names for generations. We're like actually living out that promise from the Torah. You're showing us something? Oh, that's the part from, the part I'm talking about is back in the end of Genesis, which is fine. So we have this sort of very direct fulfillment of the blessing.
Is the blessing the one in the Hebrew and then the English underneath it?
Yeah, right here.
Okay.
Yeah. In the context of the Torah, in the portion, it comes up sort of a little bit out of the blue. Parshat Naso is a bit of a mishmash of different themes that all have to do with what the priests do, different things that the priests have as their responsibility, one of which is reciting this blessing. And the key feature of this blessing, and we'll get into it, Cantor Green will get into it a bit more when he's explaining sort of the mechanics, is that what this is it is not the priest's blessing. It is God blessing through the conduit of the priests. So if you put yourself into a very priestly frame of mind and the way that the priests in the time of the Torah understood the function of the temple, and this I talk about especially on Yom Kippur because it's relevant, that the temple is like this cosmic navel connecting heaven and earth. That, have you heard this spiel before, Eric? You're smiling. That this is how we communicate, that we send our worship up and God sends, blessing down. And all year it gets gunked up by our sins. And Yom Kippur is the day when the sacrifices that we do just clear out the pipeline and, make everything easy flowing again. And so this idea that there is like a physical conduit that is the connector and the funnel for the blessing is sort of baked into priestly thinking. And here, in the way that it lives with the priestly benediction, is that the priests themselves become the conduit for the blessing. And when we bless our children on Friday nights, we can think of ourselves as becoming that conduit for blessing. Maybe it's a little foreign if we're not priests or Kohanim or Banot Kohanim or ourselves, but the central point being that we aren't the ones that bestow blessing, right? We receive blessing, we can appreciate blessing, but God is the source of all of our blessings. And so even when we wish to bestow blessings, it is still through the conduit, that we are only the conduit of God's blessing.
Just
Yeah.
comment on the blessing in the Amida. It's omitted in a house of mourning, in the presence of those who you'd think would need more blessing than anything at that point in time. So there's my question. Well, why is that?
So we tend to, the things that get omitted in a house of mourning tend to either be things that are too happy or too sad, right? That doing this kind of a blessing might just be too, I don't know, maybe Cantor Green, you have ideas too. I know that for some of the things that we omit, it's that they're too sad making. And if someone is already in grief and in mourning, it will sort of poke them in the eye, essentially. And I think the same can be said for things that are too positive. If you're feeling like you have this loss and you're devoid of blessing, and then now we're all talking about how much blessing flows into the world from God, it's like a bit of a thumb in the eye.
Yeah,
I'm sure there's a technical term for that.
Right. There's another reason that we don't do it in a house of mourning, is that there's a possibility that the mourner, and we sometimes don't know, and maybe even, like, depending on what part of the family, they may be a Kohen or Levi. And when you're in that stage of mourning, that's during Shiva, you're absolved from doing many mitzvot. So the problem is if you do the Birkat Kohanim, and remember, or maybe not remember, but I'll point out that this is actually a prayer and a process, a reenactment of the temple service that's actually in Israel is done every day. We in the diaspora do it only on Shabbat and holidays, and actually
if we do it at all.
If we do it at all, and most synagogues, as I was going to say, most conservative synagogues particularly don't do it at all. In a house of mourning, just in case you might be requiring the Kohanim to come up and fulfill this commandment, you don't do it, just so that you're not disrespecting their Shiva. Because it's said that because this is the threefold blessing, the priestly blessing has three parts of it, as you can see, the three lines, that if somebody refuses to do their job in this mitzvah, they're actually doing three sins in one, because there are three lines. So we omit it so that we're not pressuring them to do a mitzvah.
To have to make that choice.
Yeah.
To do three sins or to walk away from their morning practice at that moment.
That's right.
Thank you. Other questions. Cantor Green's going to take us a lot more deeply into that choreography, but any questions at this point about how this...
Is it customary to put your hands on their heads when you bless them?
So for children, for blessing children, that's what I grew up with, and that's what I do. I don't know if that's what everyone does. I'm sure that this is one of the things that has a lot of diversity in its practice. I don't know. Do others have other practices?
My kids were hating this. Messing up their hair.
Just to point out that one of our participants has said in the chat that, it's public anyway, so I'll just say it, Cora, thank you. So why don't we do this in a conservative shul? There's nothing in particular about the fact that it's a conservative shul, because this is a blessing that's still in our prayers. It's still part of our service. It's just that the reenactment with the full garb and the Kohanim coming up and so on and so forth. For a number of reasons, it's kind of fallen out of favor, but it is traditional, and it's still part of some traditional conservative synagogues. There's no reason you can't do it. It's just up to the local, the local rabbinate, and the leadership of the congregation as to whether they want to do that. It takes some time. There's some time. I'm not going to get into details because there's large discussions that have been held about it. But some people, there's lots of misconceptions about what it is and what the roles are and so on and so forth. And unless you teach on it and implement it slowly and make sure everyone's along for the journey, it just has middling success. So
it also is so infrequently practiced that
right.
It's hard to, if you spend any time in Israel and are a regular davener there, where it's a daily occurrence, it's, you know, it can become more meaningful than if you only encounter something, you know, a few times a year and there's a lot of people involved and a lot of choreography. It can lose its impact if it's not done with the
And yeah, and it has nothing to do with men versus women, because I did this in one of my previous synagogues. It was fully egalitarian and it was beautiful. So it definitely has a very, very traditional application in egalitarian conservative synagogues.
Do you want to go into that, how duchening looks when it's done?
Sure. So I'm going to stop sharing that screen, and I'm going to share some other screens here. So this is kind of what duchening looks like. If you could see that on your screen. I'll talk a little bit about it. What is duchening? So the word comes from, it's actually an anglicization of the Yiddish for the name for bima. So the duchan is the little step up in front of the ark, sometimes just considered the bima if it's in front of the ark. And the blessing itself, the act of doing this whole blessing as a conduit through the Kohanim, is also called Birkat Kohanim, because it's the blessing through the Kohanim. It's also called the threefold blessing for obvious reasons. We talked about the 3 lines, which are Yevarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha, may God protect you and keep you. Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'chuneka, may God shine God's face towards you and show you and be gracious to you. And Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom, may God again turn God's face towards you and grant you the blessing of peace. So threefold blessing. It's also called the Aharonic blessing, another name for the Kohanic blessing, because Aharon was the first Kohen and the first one to proclaim this or to intone the words. It's also called Nesiat Kapayim because we raise our hands. Well, not we, but the Kohanim. So when the Kohanim are blessing or transmitting the blessing to the congregation, it looks like this. Okay, under the talit. And what that is we're creating the Hebrew letter Shin, which is the letter that represents the name of God Shaddai. And that's, you can see that going on under you can't really see it under the talitot of the Kohanim, but that's what's happening.
It's supposed to be a secret. We should make sure that's clear. That there's because the kahuna or the priesthood is passed down, you know, in a hereditary way. There's this sort of lore that, you know, traditionally passed from father to son, and if you're on the outside of the system, you don't know what the hand. But you know, Spock ruined it for everyone.
Yes,
I heard that it was also a symbol that they used in the concentration camps or outside the concentration camps to indicate something.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, possibly. Actually,
Hi, it's Evan and Carol. You guys are making a little light of that. Growing up in a fairly Orthodox school in Winnipeg, they used to scare the daylights out of the kids by telling them that if you looked at the Kohanim when they were duchening, you would be struck by lightning.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's much more than just a secret.
Doesn't that make you just want to look more and more fascinated and curious about what's happening? That's why they do that.
That's right. That's the little secret.
Curious.
That's the little secret that nobody but that's a little well-kept secret, is that, you know, this is the thing that like the Megillah reading is made for children, like things like this where we really want, like Manishtana during the Seder is made for children. This is the thing. Like they tell us in grade school, don't look, you know, something bad will happen, which is total gobbledygook, of course. But the thing is, we're supposed to look. That is, we're told not to. We're not supposed to look because there's supposed to be a concentration, a real concentration on what's being said, not necessarily what it looks like. But the reality is this can have an incredible impact on children from a very young age. And how do we do that? We peek out from our parents' talit and we just take a quick glance at what's going on. It's fascinating.
It does create this beautiful, you know, I've heard tell, I didn't grow up with this in my life, but if you did grow up with it, that, you know, little, you know, kids hide under their dad's talit, and it's this like lovely tender moment that gets created for that little family unit as well because of this mythology around like don't look and, you know, etc.
Yeah.
I think the term we're looking for is mystique.
Yes, I think that's right.
It's a dimension of mystique to the spiritual, so it really enhances this whole process. It's an experience beyond the regular experience of davening.
That's right. That's right. So what do we see when the Kohanim are up there? First of all, they start off facing the ark, and they put they've taken their shoes off. I'm going to jump to the actual what it looks like, because just beforehand, the Levim participate in a ceremony where they use a becher, a container, to ceremonially wash the hands of the Kohanim. That was our Levitical, I say our because I'm part of that tribe, the Levitical responsibility in the temple. So that's the other thing about this, is that this is the only, here's a little trivia for you, the only surviving mitzvah from the temple service that we still do today. This is the only one. So I defy you to find another one. There you go. Okay, so the Levim have washed the hands of the Kohanim. The Kohanim have taken off their shoes, and they go up on the bima. That is one reason cited that some people have a problem with duchening. It's that, how could you take off your shoes in synagogue? Well, okay, they did that in the temple, so not going to get too far into that. But they face the ark, the Kohanim. They put their talit over their heads, and they've got their hands in the formation, and they sing the blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidashanu. Bit different formula than usual. Bikdushato shel Aharon, because of the holiness of Aharon. V'tzivanu, and commanded us levarech et amo Yisrael be'ahava. Somehow it always morphs into an actual singing chant by the end of it. And during the course of singing this, they have turned around 180 degrees and are channeling whatever came through the ark, which is Avodah Zarah, but from God, represented by the ark and the Torahs, of course. And they turn around and they face the congregation, who, of course, are all under their own talit, or not looking, or stealing glances as well they should. Then the Cantor does a repeat after me, word by word. The law is that the Cantor has to completely finish saying the prompt word, or like the teleprompter, before the Kohanim repeat the word. So, Yevarechecha, Yevarechecha. And the Cantor will do it in an undertone. The Kohanim will say it out loud. Each word, word for word. There's a tradition in synagogues that do this duchening, that before the last word of every phrase, I've got it only in the third one because that was the tradition I used at my synagogue in Connecticut, where there's ay, there's a nigun. Ay, 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 ay. Ay, 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 ay. Ay, 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 ay. Then they repeat the word shalom. So what is this melody? Why is it there? So whenever we have ay in the davening, you can almost be certain that this is a Misinai melody. A Misinai melody means from Sinai, and the implication that it's so old, it's as old as the hills, or the original hill, as the case may be, that this was a melody that God gave to Moses on Mount Sinai and passed it along. In reality, it's a German drinking song from 400 years ago. Okay, don't tell anyone. Okay, so why do we sing an ay there? Well, there's a Kabbalistic tradition of reciting a paragraph that has to do with each of the three lines, that focuses on the theme of each of the three lines that the congregation is supposed to say under their breath, while the Kohanim are chanting this thing. So that's why we have that ay there. And what else can I tell you that we haven't already discussed, because we have covered a lot of ground already. This is great. So just to go
I'm
back.
sorry, sorry, Cantor, I didn't understand why it was there. I didn't understand.
Why the nigun was there?
Yeah.
Okay, so the nigun is a song without words, ay. It's there to for the Kohanim to chant, to sing this song, to give the congregation a chance to say this. There's a Kabbalistic paragraph that appears in the Siddur with Birkat Kohanim, or at least traditional Siddurim. Nowadays, even synagogues that do this today, sometimes the ay is just there because it's a musical tradition, and we don't have that Kabbalistic paragraph because it's not like fitting for today's time. So it's there to give the opportunity to engage in this Kabbalistic tradition.
I think what we're kind of saying is that there are ways in which this piece of liturgy is like in transition, right? In this move from like Israel to Chutz La'aretz and in an egalitarianizing way. Like this is, you know, this is almost, I don't want to say a vestige because it's too beautiful to want to give up. But it does seem as though there are ways in which that we're moving away from, whether it has to do with egalitarian things, which we can talk more about, or just the amount of Jewish literacy that's required of a larger part of the congregation. The Kohanim and the Leviim have to know what their role is. There's all this choreography. It all happens sort of without much introduction while other things are happening. Like there's a lot of congregational knowledge, not just amongst the clergy, that's required to pull this off. And that might be why we see a bit of waning as well.
Yeah, and I can add on to that. One of the things that we experienced with congregants as we were trying to educate them and institute this in my synagogue, which worked, by the way, very well because we did this training, was to, and actually, Teresa, we also did this in London. We trained up a whole group of Kohanim to do this, and it was beautiful. We had like 28 people on the Bima once. It was very cool, men and women. So the interesting thing is people forget that, okay, we talk all about the Kohanim, Birkat Kohanim. So some people say, well, this is very exclusive, so why would we do this? Like, I don't feel included. And what we have to remember is actually this is one of the most, and I think this is a reason that it survived from temple times, is that it's one of the most egalitarian things we do, or could do, in that the Kohanim obviously have the role of being the conduit for the blessing. The Leviim have their traditional age-old role of hand washing, which is an honor, not a, like, and it's not about feet, and it's not about, like, body parts. It's nothing like that. It's a huge honor, and it's just pouring some water into a basin, and it's beautiful, and it's a prideful thing. And then people think, like, well, those are the, you know, the
what about the rest of us?
What about the rest of us? There is no reason to do Birkat Kohanim, and in fact, you don't do Birkat Kohanim when there are no Yisraelim in the congregation. There is nobody to bless if there are no Yisraelim, and therefore the Kohanim do not get the privilege of the role if there are not Kohanim in the congregation. By the way, one of the questions that's often asked, which is on another topic, but not exactly on this topic, is that, you know, the tradition in the service to call up the Kohanim to do this comes in one of the prayers in our holiday thing where we go, Kohanim la'avodatam, Kohanim, come up and do your job, literally. Leviim l'ziram l'shiram, and the Levim are gonna sing. Ve'anshe Yisraelin vehem, and the Yisrael, the people of Israel, the rest of the tribes, you know, the Israeli tribe, to receive the blessing. So when we call up the Kohanim, even if we know there is only one Kohen in the house, we still call Kohanim, not Kohen. You know, we don't say that because why? Just in case there's a Kohen we don't know about. So even if we know there's only one Kohen, we still call Kohanim because somebody might.
I wonder, Cantor, if I'm trying to remember if I ever saw this when I was in Israel. There are times when in shuls where, like ours, where you give the first aliyah and the second aliyah to Kohen and Levi, when you really need to honor somebody else with that aliyah, that you'll like quietly send the Kohanim out of the room at that moment. I mean, we just do like, you know, b'mechilat Kohen or with the permission of the Kohen. I wonder if there are times when we need to skip the duchenin and let's just like quietly ask the Kohanim to step out at that part. So there aren't any.
I mean, yes, it applies the same way. If for some reason let's say the rabbi, but the clergy team or the ritual committee or all of the above deem that the service is incredibly long for whatever reason, it's a holiday, you've got halal, you've got a special musaf, you've got, maybe there's a bar mitzvah, like, you know, and so if you want to be true to the letter of the law and you normally do Birkat Kohanim, you can observe the letter of the law, because if you don't have a Kohen, you don't do duchening. So there's an understanding among Kohanim that are educated in Birkat Kohanim that if you give them the wink and the nod, they step out. So yes, that can be applicable here too. There's loopholes for everything.
We love a loophole.
Okay, so so that's that. So the idea that this is an egalitarian thing, and then the idea of men and women, just a beautiful, beautiful concept. There is no reason whatsoever in our time that even a conservative synagogue might just call Kohanim, and the implication is Kohanim and Bat Kohanim are Kohanim for that purpose, and everyone just gathers together on the bima as any Bat Kohen would for an aliyah, and so on and so forth.
So can I just spell that out a little further, the sort of egalitarian critique, right? So traditionally, Kohanim, priests, can only be men, and it's passed down father to son. And so women are left out entirely of that system. However, now we recognize Banot Kohen, Bat Kohen, someone who's a woman whose father, only still father, is a Kohen. And she can consider herself to be a Bat Kohen and function in these same ways in our egalitarian congregation. Now, in some places, once that woman, if that woman gets married to someone, she loses that kahuna status. We don't hold by that. And even that can be seen, the fact that some people have a different sort of tribal status. It is not egalitarian. It's true. We're not all the same. And it does privilege the lineage through the father, that the kahuna, that if, for example, Alana Albert Novick is a Bat Kohen, right? But her children are not also Kohanim because her husband is not a Kohen. So there isn't quite an egalitarianism between how the kahuna is passed down, even in our egalitarian attempts. However, there is this idea that, even though kahuna is passed through the father, we know that Jewish status generally is passed through the mother. So we're doing our best, I think, to try to hold all of these traditional categories and make them as egalitarian and as inclusive as possible, as gender egalitarian, if not like altogether egalitarian across all people.
But ironically, it's whether child is Jewish or not, it's mother that.
Exactly. So the Jewish status comes from the mother. The tribal status comes from the father. So both parental contributions contribute to the status. So there's an egalitarianism in that the sort of the ritual status of the child is established in both directions, and it matters in another thing that Kohanim do, which is Pidyon Haben. So Pidyon Haben, people know what Pidyon Haben is? Most people, not everybody. So if a first child who is a boy who is born through the birth canal must be redeemed ritually from the priests on the 30th day of life. However, that is only if neither parent is a Kohen or a Levi. And so it actually doesn't happen as often as you might think, because girls are born, or there's a C-section, or there's a pregnancy loss beforehand, or whatever. But again, the tribal status of both parents is significant in whether or not someone needs to have a Pidyon Haben.
I think Teresa will appreciate this. I think Lester figured out that it's one in something like 3,000 births that you have the opportunity to do a Pidyon Haben when you calculate natural birth. And
you're muted, I think.
Oh, really?
She's muted.
Oh yeah, that's
She's
fine.
Answering, yeah.
So yeah, I think I can't remember if that was the exact number, but it's a very small proportion.
Has anyone been to a Pidyon Haben?
Yeah.
Yeah? My son had one. My big one, obviously.
A big Pidyon Haben.
My big son.
That makes sense.
Regardless, and they not necessarily at 30 days, but they do close as possible. And it's a huge big party.
Who is that?
In Israel.
In Israel.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a huge big party. That's what my sister was saying. I mean, she had two really shocks because her daughter-in-law is Sephardi, and they had a Sephardi moel the same Sephardi moel for all three boys. And apparently in certain Sephardi circles, there is a tradition of taking this baby who's been freshly circumcised, throwing him up in the air and catching him. And she thought she was going to die when she saw the moel, who was actually a urologist who did all three kids, who just took this child, threw him up in the air. She said, she said, she was frozen. She said, it's going to drop him. And no, he just caught him quite nicely.
There are more baby welcomings especially for boys, like in very Orthodox communities. Like there's like a Shalom Zachar. Has anyone heard of a Shalom Zachar?
No.
Which is like the first Shabbat that a baby, even before their bris, that like the parents will, be feted and welcome people. So when a boy's born, people get really excited and have at least 3 or 4 different moments for celebration.
Well, that's because they're under the misnomer or misconception that the Mashiach is going to be a man, so...
It's obviously not true.
Not true. Probably not true.
Well, but you know what? It kind of makes a very different biological sense. Sorry for my kind of interjection here. Is that for every 104 boys conceived, there is 100 born, and by the time they get to adulthood, it's close to 10% less males than females.
Huh, interesting. Didn't know that.
Yeah.
Makes sense, though.
So, which is, so that kind of makes kind of a very different. And if you look at what's happened with COVID, mortality in males is higher, severity of the disease is higher, and it's attributed to something to do with a metabolic thing in men.
So if you have a choice, be a woman rather than a man.
Definitely.
Well,
apparently we all have that choice today.
I mean, it's what you're born with. You're stuck with it.
Nope.
That's what my mother
Well,
told
me. the chromosomes, yes, you're stuck with. You can't change the chromosomes, right?
No, I know, but I was told when I said, "Oh, it would be nice to be a boy because I could do this, that, and the other," and she said, "Well, that's what you are. You're a girl, so live with it." Right?
Do a lot of the things anyway, right? Yeah.
Right.
You can do whatever you want anyway. So what's the point?
You can be a bat kohen. You can do duchening.
Well, I'm not a bat kohen.
No,
so
you're not. But women in general.
Yes, I can't do duchening.
Does anyone have any interesting stories about if you've seen this done or if you've any feelings on it? What Birkat Kohanim duchening itself?
I think we did it. I saw it once, and I remember that when I was in day school, used to play at saying, "Can you separate your fingers?" And if you couldn't separate your fingers, then you weren't. If you could separate your fingers, then you were a Kohen. If you couldn't separate your fingers.
I thought you were a Vulcan. That's what it was.
No, nobody. You are Vulcans at that time. Not in the 30s. Sorry.
I have a personal experience with Birkat Kohanim that I'll share. So I lived in Israel a few different times, and in Israel, I want to say the first time I lived in Israel, I wasn't a regular davener, but the second time I was doing rabbinical school, so I was like part of a minyan, and I was a regular davener in various settings. And I remember one Shabbat in particular. I was davening with a minyan that wasn't my normal morning minyan. And there happened to be that day only one bat kohen in the group. And it's a woman that I know, and she was a friend of mine. And she happens to be like, a person who would probably be in the choir if she lived in town, right? A very musical person. And I can still remember the sound of her voice when there's just one voice. And like, I felt all of the ways that we just described what's supposed to be happening, that I felt that she was this conduit. I felt it just gives me chills still. It was, it's one of those spiritual moments that we gather up in our lives and hold on to. It was a really, really powerful moment of, seeing how this bracha, and I love that it was in an egalitarian setting and then with a woman's voice, really can have the impact that it's intended to. I don't know if I came out more blessed afterwards, but I certainly had a powerful davening experience because of Birkat Kohanim and because there was a bat kohen who was doing it.
Well, at the shul I grew up in Winnipeg, again, very Orthodox, old-fashioned. So, of course, the notion of a bat kohen would have been next to blasphemy in those days. We only did it in that shul on high holidays, not on a regular Shabbat. And I found the whole thing absolutely terrifying because of this ridiculous superstition that I was young and foolish enough to believe in. So it, in fact, was not a spiritually uplifting experience for me until I was a little bit older, because it was simply too scary.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing I wanted to mention is there seems to be more of a tendency for those of us, and it looks like everybody on the call who are old enough to have grown children, Rabbi, yourself accepted, and Chazan.
They're coming.
As your children get older and they no longer live with you, you don't see them as often. And I've noticed a tendency of parents to use this bracha on their children when they do see them. Any comment on that?
I also see people who, make it a point that they need to give their kids this bracha, that they have to have a phone call every Friday afternoon, right? It creates an obligation, a mutual obligation to bless and to be blessed that requires you to call your mother at least once a week.
I love that. That's beautiful.
That's a great idea. Absolutely.
Nice.
Yeah.
So that's what I've seen. Yeah.
We also do it when our child is leaving. When she's going back, she happens to live in Toronto. And now that I've participated in this, I'm also going to participate when he does the prayer with her on her, because I just now realized, why am I being quiet? We could do it together.
Absolutely.
And it would be our family unit. Unfortunately, we just have the one kid, but actually it's just occurred to me, and I'm so grateful. Also, thank you so much for having chosen this topic to do today.
When we do it at my house, I'll put my hands on my kid's head, and my mom will put at the same time, because she doesn't know the words as well as I do. She'll put her hand on my head, and it's like this, 3 generations, and she can repeat after me when I'm saying it. I also wanted to say, Carol, you reminded me, we also use this at life cycle moments. Like very often it's part of baby naming, it's part of brisses, it's part of weddings, it's part of bar mitzvahs. It's not usually part of funerals, which is interesting because it is a blessing we use at other parts of life. But again, we're avoiding it in Shiva houses. Maybe you're not feeling so blessed at the moment of your burial, but it is often part of other life cycle moments, and carries that weight as well.
Can I?
The only other thing I find a little bit odd is, because our child is a girl, the introduction's absolutely different. The Yisimech instead of Yisimcha, but the fact that the rest of the blessing is written in the
masculine
Zachar and not the Nekeva, it does seem funny to say to a girl Yevarechecha instead of Yevarech.
Yevarechech.
Yevarechech, yes.
Yeah, we did want to ask you that. I don't know, are you going to go through each pasuk or just?
Yeah, we could certainly do that. We have some time. Is that right, Rabbi Zuker?
Yeah, we do. And there are some structural things that are interesting to notice as well about how the bracha is built that are worth looking at.
Yeah, it's Jewish haiku.
If we should be changing just in our little house when we're only doing it on her. So whatever your thoughts are.
My thoughts are, when something is a quote from the Torah, we're quite reluctant to change it. Right. Adding the introduction, hopes to make it feel more appropriate. But I hear you. There are so many times when, the generic masculine is just what we're stuck with. So that would be what I would say.
It's fine. I just wanted to know.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And there are people who choose to update the grammar, the dikduk to genderize it appropriately. But it is Torah, so maybe that's a reason not to.
Not only that, Yevarchech is a real tongue twister.
It certainly
is.
What
the whole thing is a mouthful, but it's a lot. When you look at it and you see, and there's this sort of 3-5-7 structure of the number of words in each paragraph, in each line. But even amidst that, many of the words are, a mouthful and many, many syllables.
I'll be back with you in 1 second.
Okay. He's got a phone call. But he's the one who could pull up the screen. So if you think about the way that the blessings are structured, each one has Adonai in the second position, and the second word. And so you get like there's two verbal features in each line. Yivarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha will bless and guard. Ya'er will, I don't know how you shed light upon, enlighten.
From or.
Adonai v'chuneka, and will show mercy. Yisa, and then vayasem. God will lift up his face and set down or send down peace. There's sort of two, there's like a God action and then what God is sending out in each of the lines. So it's sort of very like there's a movement aspect to each of the lines of like, and again, it promotes that sense of conduitness, that things are moving through in an active way.
Right. So let's talk about what the words actually mean. We'll take a look at root words or shorashim. So in the first line, am I still sharing the screen? I'm not. Let me do that again.
You're not.
This one. Okay.
Lisa's suggesting in the chat that maybe they had so many children that the odds were there would be at least one. So just keep it in the masculine.
Maybe. Although we, in my household, we have 3 boys and we bless each of them separately. So, that's, so maybe not a factor. I don't know. But there we go. So can everyone see the text on the screen?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So Yivarechecha, well, that highlighting didn't work well. Yivarechecha has the word baruch in it. We know the word baruch means bless. So may God bless. Yeh is the prefix that means may, like future action or imperative. So Yivarechecha, please God bless, Adonai. Vayishmerecha has the word shamor in it. So lishmor is to guard or protect. So Yivarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha, may God bless and protect. And Ya'er, oops, I'm on the wrong wrong screen here. I've got 2 of these on my screen. Ya'er, again from the root word or light, and with a yud in front of it means future or imperative or you, God, please. Ya'er, give light, Adonai, or shine your light, panav, of your face, God's face. Elecha, to us. Vichuneka has the word chen in it. Chen means, it has a number of different meanings and implications in the Torah. It can mean satisfaction or, what's the word? Favor. Mercy, yeah. Favor, yeah, these sorts of things. So like
often when applied to God, like chanun, right? God is chanun verachum. God is merciful and compassionate. It's often evoked in opposition to God's sort of strict judgment side. So we're evoking a certain aspect of godliness that is more mercy than justice at a moment seeking blessing.
Yeah. Yisa, from like raising up, which is, by the way, one of the reasons that we call this Nesiat Kapayim. Nesiat is the same root word, Nasa, Naso. We've come across this word all over the place, which means to raise up. So Yisa, Adonai, may God raise up. Panav, God's face. Elacha, to us. I'm on the wrong screen again. V'yasem, and grant, from the same word as like sim shalom, grant peace. V'yasem, and grant peace. Lecha, well, you. God. Ayayai means ayayai. And
profound.
And sometimes it can mean something's gone terribly wrong. I have a great story about ayayai. Shalom, of course, means grant. What are we granting? Peace. Sim shalom, v'yasem lecha shalom. You should grant peace. So I have a friend who is one of the... I
just want to say before you want. So notice the 3, 5, 7, right? That there are 3 words in the first line, 5 in the second, and 7 in the third. There's all kinds of like mystical gematria reasons that are offered for this, as well as reasons for the number of syllables, and and also in the Torah where this blessing occurs, it's laid out not in like full lines. It's like 3 separate lines so that there's white space. So it's noteworthy to see, and it draws your attention to the structure as well as the content of the blessing. Sorry, Cantor, go ahead.
No, it's okay. Oh, that was quick. Okay.
Except the
I'll get it to show people.
Okay. So I have this friend who I used to sing in the Shar Shemaim choir when I was like a teenager. And he later went on to become a cantor as well. and he got his first position. I think it was first position. Michael, if you're seeing this, you'll correct me if I'm wrong. His name's Michael Smolash, and he became a cantor, and he was apprentice to Cantor Benny Meisner at Temple Holy Blossom in Toronto. And he got on the bima for the first time, and he sang, I don't know, whether Yismechu v'malchutecha or whatever, Yismechu v'malchutecha, and ended up with some ayayais in the piece. I can't access it quickly enough at the moment, but he sang ayayay, 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 whatever it was. And then, moments later, he gets as he describes it, a vicious tap on the shoulder. And in this Reform synagogue, because he grew up in, singing in this Orthodox synagogue choir. Huge tap on the shoulder. He said it actually caused quite a bit of pain. And he said, the guy came up to him and said, it's an Israeli guy who said, "We don't ay here." So
I'm going to just show you in a tikkun. So you can see maybe can't see the lines, but here are where the lines are. So they create white space. So they draw your attention the way that they're written in the Torah.
But the III screws up the 7 words.
You're right. It's a problem.
We had a case at High Holidays a number of years ago in our shul. You weren't the chazan at the time, Cantor, so nothing on you. The chazan was up doing an III on a beautiful tune, and the guy in the row next to us says, I looked at the sitter. What's with the III? There's no III here.
Sounds familiar. It's very funny. So
I have a question.
Sorry.
You said that this was part of the Amidah, but and this is a really dumb question, but why is it said at other times? Just as a blessing on? What's the purpose of it?
The purpose is to bless the congregation. So, but it's such a powerful blessing that it's used in all these other situations as well. So,
basically, whenever you want.
I mean, kind of, yeah. I mean, this is as well known and as I think as well known throughout the entire world as it gets. I mean, how many interfaith gatherings have I been to where the priest or the imam recites this prayer?
Exactly, that's what I was going to say. But both the Catholics and the Muslims have picked this one up, and then when you tell them that it comes out of the 4 or 5 books, they look at you with surprise. Kind of deal.
I think one of the reasons that we use this in so many contexts, and it's hard to recognize this because our liturgy is so evolved and we have so much poetry that has developed over the course of 2,000 years. But in the early days, the rabbis were very, very reluctant to praise God with any words that they themselves came up with. How could I possibly come up with words that are grand and wonderful enough to praise God and to say something about God? And so whenever they could pull language directly from the Torah, that was their preference to do. And so it's not surprising to me that if we have words of blessing that come directly from the Torah, that those are the words that we would use when we're seeking blessing. Spontaneous prayer is not really a part of Judaism in the same way that it is sort of, some Christian religions where, they hold hands and sort of spontaneously pray. I certainly, as in an interfaith context, sometimes see how much some of our Christian colleagues are so well rehearsed at just sort of breaking out in an appropriate and meaningful prayer in the moment. It's not a modality that's very native to Judaism. And I think that's because we always look for a textual source and a biblical source. And so that's why we go to those words over and over again, even though it may take some finagling with the gender or the context or whatever to make them fit specifically. But it comes from a place of humility, of our unwillingness to think that we're worthy of, writing, even though eventually we wrote plenty of, of prayers that found their way into the Siddur.
I'll share something that blew my mind. I'm not sure if it's entirely true, but if it is, it's kind of mind-blowing. So it's so well known that it became almost the worldwide, I mean, at least in English, but I'm sure it's in other languages too, that, the idea that when somebody sneezes, you say, bless you, and it's just a shorthand for Yevarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha.
Lisa was asking about that before.
Isn't that incredible? The whole world whether they know it or not, is starting this prayer off. And actually, that's one of the things that was one of the issues that dissenters that we'd been trying to teach had, was that, like, how could the Kohanim bless me? They're practically not religious at all, and maybe they don't even know me. How can they bless me? Well, of course, they're conduits, right? But the idea is, like, would you turn down a blessing if a stranger, after you sneeze in, this in the street, and somebody says bless you? Do you do you turn down the blessing? You say thank you, and you're appreciative. So this is something to take away for this as well, is that the Kohanim have a job to do, and it's not coming from them, and it has nothing to do with their level of piety. So that's one of the things that I teach on. When
it can be difficult when you see other, people, because it functions like an honor might function in some ways in a synagogue service, which we know are coveted, and there's a limited number of them. So you could see how that criticism might work its way up. But if you do reframe it in terms of service rather than honor, it helps a little. Eric.
And the sneezing, the blessing has been translated in Yiddish, not translated, but said in Yiddish, which my mother didn't speak Yiddish, but she used to use the Yiddish expression where we sneezed. And she used to say, "Ich sein frimmen out." I'll see you religious and old, basically. God bless you.
Right. And keep the idea,
keep you, and yeah.
Eric, go ahead.
Yeah, so one of the problems with the Kohanim in sort of our contemporary situation is that it's very hard for some congregants to get past the personality of the Kohen who's doing the duchening, because that guy did a business, he's such a ganef, and how can I take a blessing from him? Get him off of there. So it's that kind of, that's one of the issues that's been a problem.
Yeah, I've heard that exact
I think that's why a lot of conservative congregations have just said, well, we don't have to do it.
Yeah, and
that's
again,
why
the answer
is comes.
That's right. I like that. That's your moment to think the negative thoughts. No, we don't do that.
No.
So as we talked about a little bit earlier, there's all these other applications for it. One of the things that I did in London, if it's okay, Rabbi Zuker, for me to share a 1-minute piece of music.
Yeah.
So in my previous synagogue, we did many baby blessings. I call them baby blessings, but baby namings in this part of the world. And Teresa sang in the in the choir that I did this. So this is a lullaby that I wrote for Birkat Kohanim, and that we used to bless. Actually, the first time we did it was one of the choir members had a baby, and we did this for the first time. But it became part of the repertoire. So I'm going to share my screen, but it's really not that interesting to look at. It's more of a sound thing. And it's 1 minute long, so it won't take up too much of our time. Which is exactly what I sing when we have a bar mitzvah or a bat mitzvah.
I know, it's making me miss shul.
What's that?
Bye, Deborah. Making me miss shul hearing you sing that.
I know.
We love it. We love it.
The only thing we didn't mention, Cantor, is the King Hiratzons, right? That the response to each line when the prayer leader during the Amidah is doing it is not Amen, which is normally what the congregation responds to something, which, you know, sort of affirms, I agree, you know, but when we say, but we say, Ken Yehi Ratzon, so may it be. It's interesting. It's a bit more tentative of a response than Amen, right?
Yeah.
It's a bit more wishful than definitely affirmative, but in case you hear it and don't know what's going on, Ken Yehi Ratzon.
Ken Yehi Ratzon, that's right. Yes, that's very true. And that is the reason that it's not Amen, although different Sidurim around the world actually for the last one sometimes say Amen Ken Yehi Ratzon.
Yeah.
So yes, so it's an interesting distinction because Amen means I have faith in this, I believe in this, I'm going to take this to the bank. Ken Yehi Ratzon is it's a request, not it's a right. Yehi means again, may it be.
Yeah.
And similarly, you know, I guess as opposed to where we say Amen, it's definitive, as Rabbi Zuker just said. Here we're asking for something else. Mm-hmm. It's quite interesting. We're asking that it may be.
That it may be God's will. Right?
That it may be God's will. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Again, so turning back to God and not that it's these mere mortals' words.
Yeah. Michael, did you want to ask something or say something?
No, I was just wondering if it was KBI Squire.
That wasn't KBI's choir.
That wasn't KBI's choir.
Someday it will be.
It very well could be.
Harmony was unbelievable.
Thank you.
Whoever the chazan was sounded terrific.
Amazing.
Thanks. It was hard to get him to do my composition, you know, like...
Really?
No. Yeah, actually, the secret is that that's all me in the background. It's multi-track recording.
Oh,
wow.
The whole choir was amazing.
That's not what that was about. It's about the words.
Yeah.
But yeah, good.
So I guess the final question for us to think about is how blessing, you know, in what ways are we having access to blessing in our lives in this time? Like maybe our traditional conduits, you know, whether in a official way, like in a shul tefillah way, or just the regular ways in which we go about our life are cut off from us. What other conduits are we finding? I mean, this Zoom screen is like one conduit for me to be able to see all of you. But it's definitely something that's worth reflecting upon. You know, our desire for prayerful life and for blessing exists in our liturgical structures and in our official prayer moments, and then obviously also the point of it is for it to exist in the rest of our lives also outside of prayer services. So you know, I hope that that's something we can keep meditating upon, and then when we can be together again, we'll appreciate all the more the blessings that we can now hear and say.
And I think it's a wonderful blessing that Rabbi Zuker, that you've that you and I have been able to do this together. I love doing programs with you, and
this wasn't so here. Not that it really makes it mine, but this was my bat mitzvah parsha. Now so is my bat mitzvah parsha, and people get confused. So on my talis bag, actually, I have Birkat Kohanim. It's that you can sort of tell. When I was in Israel, I bought my talis bag and my tefillin bag. People think I'm a Kohen or a bat Kohen, but it's just because it was in my parsha. So I feel an extra connection to this blessing and have it on my talis bag also.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
this is the second or the third session of this blessing Thursday afternoon thing.
This is a standalone. This is just this.
Oh.
We've learned everything we can teach you about this, Eric. That's it.
I thought maybe there was one last week that I missed.
There are different ones.
Yeah, every Thursday. Last week, was it last week or 2 weeks ago? Rabbi Cantor,
the Rant and Chant. That was last week.
Yeah, that was last week.
So next week, I guess, will be the curses.
The Tochacha up next.
I've just been I've been reading the Torah in an English translation, JPS, and cover to cover, and I'm just finishing up Dvarim now. So
it's the #1 all-time universal world bestseller.
That's right.
You don't have Netflix?
But it's an unusual experience reading the Chumash cover to cover just in the plain English, even though the translation is some problematic, and the editors were kind enough to put footnotes saying a meaning ambiguous, Hebrew uncertain. So even the experts have trouble with some of this stuff.
So in my previous congregation, I had a class, a once a week lunchtime class, where we did that. We started at the beginning of Bereshit and we just read. And wherever we got to, we stopped and we picked up the next week and kept going. I would bet you $5, Eric, you will not make it into Isaiah. Isaiah is where that method of reading straight through breaks down. That book cannot be read cover to cover, and that is where we tapped out at Isaiah.
Bogged down. Yeah.
At one of my previous posts, we had a quite an interesting group of characters who also did this, but took a different slant on reading through the entire text. We looked at every hapax legomenon, which is every word that doesn't have, like, it only appears once in the Torah, so there's no way to really know what it means because it's there's no context to compare to and contrast with. And we tried to, it was like a game of dictionary where we tried to convince each other what the word actually meant.
Ah, that's funny.
Yeah, it was fun. That's another way to read the Torah.
Some of this book is badly written. Some of it is beautiful and poetic. And the whole thing is desperately in need of editing.
Yeah, definitely.
3,000 plus years, and that's what it is.
Yeah.
Don't fix what ain't broken.
Oh, there's plenty in there that requires a lot of explanation. I don't know if that means it's broken, but requires extra.
That is what it makes it, but that's what it makes it like a constitution, because if you don't understand it, you have to build around it.
Yeah.
Are you reading this?
Cora's showing me her JPS Tanakh.
Is that the one you're reading?
No, but it's 20th century, mid 20th century translation, as opposed to the 1906.
So that is that one. That's the NJPS that she's holding up, as opposed to the earlier JPS.
Because the only other thing I have is the Chumash,
the stone. Yeah. Yeah. When I did that class with my previous congregation, everybody used a different we've done that a little bit in our Thursday morning. Everyone used a different translation.
Right.
That way you're really able to like get a bit more access to the Hebrew, because you sort of dig into the choices people are making in their translations. It was such a good class.
Am I missing a class?
I don't know.
I keep trying to find all these classes and I keep missing out on them.
So generally we have a class on Tuesday evening and a class on Thursday afternoon.
Thursday too. Okay.
Yeah. Sometimes
slot.
they move a little. And then there's women's Torah study on every other Wednesday night as well.
But what's Tuesday?
Tuesday evening there's a class.
Oh, okay. I'll check that again.
And
next week it's the racism reading group.
And Thursday is recurring class?
It's a different topic each week, but there is a class every Thursday.
The same time?
Yes. 2:00, yes.
Rabbi Cantor is teaching the next week's Thursday class, and he'll have a title out in the KBI Connect, I'm sure, sometime very soon.
He put something out. I can't remember what it was, but there is a topic that exists.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway.
All right.
Okay. Thanks all for joining us.
Thank you. Have a great afternoon. Stay cool. Enjoy the sun.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.